Sorry about that. I was muted. I'll repeat what I said though. I think that is very true, especially since Demon Hunters these days are almost unanimously running double Glavebound Adept on top of the double Lapidaries, which makes the mid game very, very powerful. And that size of minion is somewhat problematic for Warrior to deal with. And if Demon Hunter gets off to a very strong curve, they can sometimes make it so that Warrior doesn't even have time to play Blast Master Boom.
Well, let's jump into it now. Again, the winner here goes through to fight it out on Sunday. That one step closer to being our champion in the World Championships come December. Decent start for Posesi to get things rolling, obviously with just a minion to throw down there in this Priest versus Druid matchup. And a couple of weapons to go with the Soul Shard Lapidary is not to be sniffed at just to get the damage rolling.
Yeah, it is a pretty decent curve. One maker to start also is pretty important. It can't be underestimated how much chip damage you can get in the early game when Warrior is spending time playing the Corsair caches, equipping the weapons. They don't necessarily want to take the turn off their cycle to sword and board this, which means that, you know, Posesi can accrue damage faster than you would think.
Just going with a double jump right out the gate here. We usually see that saved for the turn when you play Skull all at the same time. But I guess he just wants to spend his mana here, thinking it'll be playable at some point later on anyway.
Pretty interesting, because the spend your mana argument would lead me to think it was maybe even Eldraki Warblades, but because he would immediately overwrite it with Marrow Slicer, even if you would swing twice with the Eldraki and then equip Marrow Slicer, it feels bad, because the healing is still somewhat useful in this matchup to have in your back pocket.
For the most part though, Posesi here just curving out, doing stuff on curve. I honestly wouldn't even be that surprised to see the Skull played on turn 6. That's a real reason to go for the double jump when he did it, even if it's unoutcasted. Just to get the cards drawn is a big deal as well.
But Tom has had some pretty blisteringly fast weapon synergy. The cutting class to help him cycle, and he's got this Dr. Krastenov up soon. Only awkward thing about it is that it's a little bit too small to one-shot the Soul Shard Lapidary, which I can only imagine is coming down this turn, but looks like it isn't.
Interesting. I guess making the snap decision here to switch over to a slightly more defensive game plan, because if he does take a turn off of developing a 5/5 here, then he's able to use the attack off of the Lapidary to heal at the same time, is the thinking, which clearly, when your opponent's just played weapon plus the upgrade as well, is worth quite a lot.
Yeah, it's got pros and cons, obviously, because not having the minion on board also means Posesi's own aggressive potential is delayed. But clearly, Posesi is valuing the healing a little bit more, and he can sort of have the best of both worlds for now.
Job done.
All the way back up to full is Posesi and Tom. Now, with the 2-3 on board, at least can take decent trades to get rid of the Lapidary and make sure that his wrench caliber is even bigger.
But he does need to be considering about switching over to a different style of game plan, because Posesi, as we've seen, switched over to the healing route. He got the damage to face, but he also healed at the same time. Tom does need to start considering his own life gain capabilities here, because he cannot just keep hitting face here and expect to win. He needs to start getting in the hero power, sword and board, getting the quartermaster online, which is why I like this somewhat more defensive route on this turn.
Yep, it's very fair. Allows him to weave it in, and the next turn still looks like Krastenov's hero power is quite clean. However, for Posesi, Shatter Shard Mystic makes quick work of this board. He can also just preload the Cane on the board. I don't think there are very many taunts that he has to worry about on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I want to do on this turn is obviously set up for the Skull from the left-hand side, which kind of requires 4 mana if you want to go Consume Magic Hero Power Blade Dance, which doesn't leave you open to go for Cane as well.
The thing is, if you go Shatter Shard first, then the Blade Dance, I believe, cannot be played because there are no minions on the other side. So the fact that he's gone Shatter Shard means that it will be the Cane for now, going for maximum pressure applied, making sure Tom does not have time for a relatively safe Blastmaster Boom.
That's the kicker for me. Yeah, I thought that just towards the end of the turn and realized, yeah, if he goes for Blastmaster Boom here, you just have lethal, I think, on the following turn. You just win right there. So it's a smart time to develop onto the board there, even if it means developing the Skull outcasted for one more turn.
Well, this is, I don't want to say strict punish, but it's the bad turn for Posesi because there was a pretty good response from Tom that also leaves a threat on the board. Militia, currently 0 fragments in the deck as well because he used the last one up with the Shard Shatter Mystic.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to bear in mind is that at this point, with this many bombs in the deck, it's not even necessarily like Skull is going to get the full outcast value at this point. It's fairly likely to hit at least 1 bomb. So just playing Skull here, I don't think is the most ridiculous thing at all to try and find those damage cards to hit lethal next turn.
That's true. He does already have the Twin Slice loaded up. Only concern is if it's Skull without Blade Dance, then you might be taking an extra 4 from the Krasinov or sinking in damage, which you also don't want to do. This is a slow turn that Tom was hoping for. Deathwing looks pretty juicy.
Yeah, it's just a way to get the damage to face while still stopping any damage coming through, which is exactly the dance we've been talking about here. Posesi going for the heal while he does the damage. Tom going for the board clear whilst he does the damage. You just want to sweep everything out of the way with your alternate means and keep smacking face every turn.
Militia gets 2 3/3s here. It's a clear with Blade Dance, but my gosh, does it feel slow. It's another turn off of the Skull, but if the Skull whiffs, Posesi can pretty much just pack up shop, and it's not even just whiff, it's like if you drop bombs, then he's even closer to dying, so I don't fault him at all for taking the safe route.
Yeah, still holding on to the second swing of the weapon, I think, is correct here. Even though he's like leaving himself a break point of 3 bombs, it feels worth it for that one massive swing that he's trying to get going here.
Oh, 6 bombs in Posesi's deck right now. Quarter of the time, he just takes damage off the draw. There's 1.
Let's go in for it first. This is risky, man.
Ooh!
Okay.
Yeah, I guess you take the turn off the other Skull, right? Because I'm interested in cashing in the Twin Slices for maximum healing.
Yeah, that second, when he reached for that second Skull, I got terrified there for a second. I was like, don't do this to me. Just heal on this turn, please. I'm begging you.
And the heal is going to get him out of 1 breakpoint, I believe, because Tom can just put him back below, or at 15 or below.
Yeah. So still going to need to be a triple bomb to finish off Posesi at the moment. But Tom's fine with that. He's doing everything you want to do with this deck. Clearing the board, swinging face every turn. And with the Horde Pillager as well, the swings just do not stop coming.
I was going to say the one scary thing for Tom is perhaps counter-lethal on the other side. There's still 2 unaccounted for discounted cards that Tom hasn't seen, so if that were Lapidary Glaive bound, he could have been in trouble, but he's generated a taunt now, and he's seen Kayn. So it feels extremely safe for Tom. And also, that is a very expensive card for Posesi to get out of the right side if he wants to outcast the next Skull.
Oh, it's such an awkward draw, isn't it? Like, do you go Aldraki swing and then Glaive Bound, but then you can't get any of the attack buffs to heal up more on that turn with Skull of Gul'dan? Is it just Skull first?
Is it? It might be Marrow Slicer, Hero Power, and Glaive Bound.
Oh,
maybe it's too brave. I don't know. But so, that gives you the strongest board position.
Yeah, it means that you stay above, having taken 3 damage from the Quartermaster and the 1/1, above the 2-bomb breakpoint.
Right. And you let the Glaive Bound push face instead of into a minion.
Oh, this is so risky playing another
scary.
Skull.
Everything is scary. There's a bomb.
Alas, poor warlock.
Oh, he's
5
alive.
bombs still in the deck.
And as it currently stands, it still needs to be 2 bombs. Tom cannot get him down to the 1-bomb breakpoint yet.
Also needs to be no fragments, technically.
Right.
Loot? What more can I ask for?
Re-equip. 6 bombs in the deck after this swing, 4 fragments in the deck. There's only 8 real cards in the deck right
Oh my god. Oh!
Job's done.
Oh!
2 in a row.
I mean,
To be
it
fair.
feels... Yeah. It feels bad, but that was definitely a somewhat expected outcome after casting 2 skulls with that many bombs in his deck.
Yeah, for Posesi, he didn't have lethal in hand either. He had to keep digging with the Chaos Strike, Twin Slices, and if you dig before the attack, you're likely dead, and if you attack before the dig, you likely can't kill Tom. So it feels like he was cornered from all fronts there. Very clean game from Tom, and it feels like the first Bomb Warrior game we've seen on stream where it panned out in the way that lets you realize why it gets banned so often.
Indeed. It was a pretty well played game from Tom. I think he had a fairly straightforward plan. You know, every turn he just cleared the board and kept swinging face, as you are supposed to do. No real questions there. And even though for Posesi it looked very risky and we were kind of hyping it up just for the entertainment's sake, I do think he was correctly going for a risky path there. He couldn't just keep not drawing cards from his deck because he needed the damage. He needed to find his own win con. And even though it didn't work out for him because he did get hit by all the bombs, I think it was the correct way to go to try and find that counter-lethal.
My one question maybe was whether he went for the slow play into Lapidary for max healing a bit too early.
Okay.
Obviously, he did get more healing because of that, but maybe a Lapidary a turn earlier could have given him a better shot to race. Not saying it was wrong or right, but something worth exploring for sure. And now that we have that matchup all locked up, it appears that we're going to be following up with Rogue versus Priest. Rogue being Tom's deck.
Indeed. Posesi going with the 2 of Control Priest. Can't call it Galakron Priest, even though it's extremely similar to the Galakron Priest because he's got Galakron, instead going for a slightly more anti-aggro package, I suppose you could say, in addition to obviously the Kobold Sticky Finger, which so far hasn't really done much of anything. It's an interesting matchup against the Rogue. It's very different to the old like Priest versus Galakron Rogue matchups, which felt like fairly favored for the Priest, even though it really shouldn't have been, but it just was. Now I think both decks are generating huge amounts of value. Although, even having said all of that, Priest usually comes out on top in terms of the value train, just about. So the pressure really is on the Rogue to put forward some kind of a strong win condition in the mid-game.
I would agree. I think Priest has pretty convenient answers to Edwin and questing, whether it be from the Shadow or Deaths or just stealing them altogether, which makes it really difficult for Rogue to come back on board because when they go all in on those tall minions, which tends to be their most common win condition, they don't often have value to follow up. And looks like our GM stats would support that Priest has a favorable matchup up against the Burgle Rogue.
Pretty insane starting hand for Tom. I think that was a full keep. Like, we could talk about maybe tossing Miscreant to try and find a spell to prep out with Edwin, but you have quite a few spells to go along with it, so I think all of these cards are just good, honestly, to throw down in the early game.
Definitely seems like it. And Posesi's also got, you know, a decent curve after he's picked up the Hot Head to fill out the 3 mana turn. But what he lacks is an immediate answer for Edwin. Another Generous Mummy? There's been far too many of those.
I mean, what Posesi lacks right now is critical information because he has no idea quite how devastated he is going to be in about 3 seconds' time. Okay, make that a little bit longer.
So Tom here paying respect to Shadow or Death, I can only assume. Not gonna lie, I would have gone for it in that spot.
Yeah,
and
I mean...
it's just because it's before the Cabal Acolyte wave breakpoint that it feels like the Edwin can be most effective.
But it still comes down before that, right, which is a pretty big deal. And you get +4/+4 because you get to play another minion beforehand and you get to prep out a spell. So it's a pretty big breakpoint in terms of the amount of value you're getting.
In terms of the size of the Edwin, I don't think that's particularly relevant because Shadow or Death is Shadow or Death. So I would if I were trying to maximize damage, I think going for the Edwin earlier on makes more sense, because it gets potentially 2 attacks and if answer isn't there. But the big
Maybe.
upside, I believe, with Tom waiting is that he potentially gives himself a way to combo out Miscreant later on and make sure that even if there is a death, there's still a decent turn following up after.
You don't pick the ones.
Posesi getting a somewhat funny amount of value here with the Jar Dealer being resurrected as well, but it's not the value that you need right now.
Yeah. Even somewhat mucks up his raised dead pool.
Yeah. Not getting, obviously, the Wave of Apathy is dreadful there. That's the only spell that he really wanted to go with the Cabal Acolyte next turn.
Job's done.
And I think he's just playing to Death or Apathy off the top.
Mm-hmm. Is this a... It's sometimes just a dagger pass there for Tom to give himself a guaranteed activator in hand for Miscreant, but if you do activate the Dirty Tricks, then you're very likely to draw a better activation for Miscreant, so I'm perfectly fine with playing it out here.
Yeah, I think that Apexis Blast face next turn is often pretty good as well, because your opponent might have Renew or Radiance or some way to try and pull out of range of the damage.
And that looks like it's exactly what's going to happen. Posesi needs to play it to stay alive on board.
No, Gia. We have seen Tom miss Apexis Blast lethal once today. He could just do it all over again here. This is definitely not necessarily game yet.
Oh, that is savage.
Okay, there it is. Oh, he saw it this time.
Wow.
Nicely done
Okay,
by Tom.
I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Fair enough. 2-0 up here to Tom, though. And while I can joke about his performance in the previous series, this was just very clean. You know, he got the Edwin, he saved it for a turn, which I still think was probably correct. He was looking at an 8-8 the other way, I think, if he went for it the turn prior, whereas he saved it for a turn, got the extra spell from the One Thief, and ended up with a 14-14 that just instantly closed out the game. There was nothing that could have been done there by Posesi, and that's what Rogue does sometimes. You just play to those games, and sometimes you hit them.
Yep, that is definitely on the opposite end of the spectrum when we look at all the possible panouts of that matchup. We've seen very crazy ones where Rogues had to try and generate value off of generating Lady Liadrin for Shadow Step, and just Rogues and Priests playing with Mage spells when Mage isn't even part of the equation. It gets pretty crazy, but this is definitely one of the outliers where you can see Edwin closing out the game immediately. And already, Posesi is down 0-2 in the blink of an eye. He's worked so hard to get here, but he's one game away from losing his chance to make it to Worlds.
Brutal stuff, but it can, of course, happen. Tom here, only with the Demon Hunter left remaining, so Posesi has to 3-0 sweep the Demon Hunter with Priest, the Mirror, and Mage. Quite clearly massively unfavored to make it at this point, even ignoring what decks may or may not have to be won with along the way. I think Priest, if we're being very generous, you can call it favored if you're a good Priest player, but I think like a lot of players would go even to slightly Demon Hunter favored. You got a Mirror, and then you got a bad matchup as the Mage. It's going to have to be a pretty miracle run here for Posesi to turn things around.
Yep, very tall order indeed. And he's going to start off with what we believe is the worst matchup, but still by no means unwinnable. Mage can definitely generate some tricks like Frostbolts, Ice Barriers, or just get off to a blisteringly fast start and bully the Demon Hunter out of the game. Primordial Studies 1 Maker feel like they're going to be kept in this hand. Jandis is pretty interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's become a meme amongst the other casters that I'm a keep Jandis, play Jandis, step Jandis gamer, that I just want all my game plans to revolve around it. Against the Demon Hunter here, I think with a couple of other cheap cards, what Posesi wants to do is find Cram Session quite clearly with the Primordial Studies already in hand, and just other cheap minions. You cannot allow the Demon Hunter to get ahead on the board at the start. You need to be making your own proactive plays, which this does.
Already, so many spell damage minions generated for Posesi. He's holding back on a lab partner altogether here because I can only assume he wants to go Solarian plus One Thief on the next turn.
Wow, Tempo Panthara here on turn 2. Clearly anticipating a scary, powerful start from Posesi.
partners.
My favorite boy band.
If you fail this lab project, you are actually just terrible with PvE partners. Okay. I think it's okay for Tom to take 1 damage net after swinging into the Solarian just to preserve his Mana Feeder Panthera.
Agreed.
In fact, I want to call it strictly better. Oh, or just saving it altogether.
That's different. That's like an entirely different line entirely. Potentially setting up for Glavebound on 5 would be the thought process here, right?
Right, I think that makes a lot of sense. Also, with the Chaos Strike in hand, he can recoup the health he loses from the Solarian going face and potentially just Soul Shear it away next turn. I think it's actually pretty smart.
Yeah, I like that. Bit of a tougher
For
spot
Posesi,
here.
this looks like pretty straightforward. Draw a ton of cards.
Right, but is it though? Because he just picked up Shenvala, which the coin quite clearly works fantastically with next turn. So do you just take your 3 card draws, or do you really need 4?
I want the 4.
Oh.
I think when you have Apprentice, you don't even need coins, so I want the most chances at Apprentice.
Fair enough.
To be fair, if you had the coin and got the Apprentice in the 3 draws, then you could potentially pop off with Shenvala the very next turn, whereas with this line, even if you did get Apprentice, you'd have to wait till 5 mana, but overall, resources seem to be king in Mage games.
And I gotta say, in the unfavorable quote-unquote matchup to start things off for Posesi, it is looking pretty nice to get things rolling. Double Arcane Breath and getting the Dragon. Shenvala, as soon as an Apprentice is drawn, can just absolutely go nutty. Looking strong.
Wow, major respect from Tom on this lab partner. That was 4 damage. I was super tempted to push face.
He just hasn't got the early board or the early damage. He needs to be playing a bit more reactively, he thinks.
But he has Shard Shatter the next turn. I figured that would be the clear on the lab partner, whether it was next turn or post Glavebound.
Yeah.
I don't know. Wow, trade gamer. Tom is a mega trade gamer.
He's got the value right. He's got Skull to follow up as well. There's a reasonable chance that your 6/4 can stick here for a turn.
I mean,
Or at the very
That's
least,
true.
it means they can't just go Cobalt, right, and move on with
It's
their
true.
day.
The fact that Tom is clearing minions isn't so much to make to stem Posesi's aggressive potential as to make sure his Glavebound would stick. That's the only reason I can think of, because with a Shard Shatter in hand, it feels definitely unintuitive to leave up, or to trade all of those minions, I should say.
That's fair. Elemental allies with this many Ellies in hand feels powerful, but I don't think quite powerful enough to pass over Deep Freeze.
Correct. That is a 1-card win condition against Demon Hunter. You can get that down at a spot where you're not just dead to a Kane or a Kane attacking phase or Refa, then Demon Hunter's other damage sources are all but shut down.
Yeah, exactly. We've seen today, Gia, that Deep Freeze is a 100% win con against Demon Hunter.
I knew you were gonna go in again. Okay. Here's the skull. This is what Tom was keeping the board as clean as possible for.
Okay. He can...
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got damage. He's potentially leading up to another skull from the right-hand side. Or if that doesn't work out, just from the left-hand side, is getting closer and closer as well.
I don't know. I think the next turn is most likely geared up to be a Marrow Slicer plus Shard Shatter turn. Of course,
Okay.
it depends on the
Yeah.
size of minions that Posesi puts down. So I feel like the skull is more likely to get played from the left. Oh, here is the Apprentice. Evocation in hand, but honestly, that's not very much space to work with.
Yeah, I mean, he just doesn't need to do it anytime soon, though, right? Like, he's going to do powerful stuff every turn. Nothing is going to stick
Yeah.
for Tom for the near future. Once Deep Freeze comes down on turn 8, this is looking miserable for Tom.
I mean, Posesi's just been under 0 pressure this game.
Yeah.
Marrow Slicer swing face with the hero power.
Yeah, unless you want to like start.
Gotta be time to start pushing.
I think so. Shard Shatter isn't really doing enough for me quite yet.
Right.
I just want to next turn see the cards dumped probably from the left-hand side and get another skull down.
Honestly, Posesi's in such a good spot where I wouldn't hate him like playing Cobalt for not the most value.
Right. Yeah, it's something like that we're leading towards, right?
Like Cobalt plus Mana Cyclone for 0 cards, I felt was not very bad at all. Just has Deep Freeze the next turn.
Another tough spot here. Like, Barrier is the card. It's what you're looking for. Missiles was free, though, which is worth so much at this point.
Barrier Combustion, ship the Mana Cyclone face.
Barrier Cyclone? Like, I don't
Sorry.
even...
I think just my main concern is that Posesi doesn't even need his apprentice. Strangely enough, just the Deep Freeze looks like a win con to me here.
Yeah. So, Combustion Mana Cyclone? I don't know. We only get one card then. But I don't care. Like, I just want to get cards out of my hand. Fair enough.
Posesi seems very upset about the turn, but he's in a great position. I just don't think he knows it quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, he missed the attack with the Mana Cyclone at the end, which was the rough spot in it. I mean, it probably doesn't matter very much, but yes, it was wrong. The game plan, again, still is intact, though. This is what we've seen from Posesi today. He's roping out on a couple of plays because he's taking a bit too long to reach the conclusion, but his instincts have been very, very strong so far.
Yeah. You can just see how much it means to him.
Yeah.
Being down 0-2 is an incredibly stressful position, but the Deep Freeze is potentially huge. Maybe not this turn. There's a fair amount of damage on the other side.
That Giant sure is spicy, though. Giant Deep Freeze looks tempting. Like, Giant Flame Strike? Probably you don't like the look of that. It just feels like too much mana spent on not much.
I don't mind it, honestly, because once you land Deep Freeze, really the only thing you're worried about is Blade Dance. That's the only way that they're gonna clear the elementals outside of a big militia, because he's already seen one Shard Shatter, so it can't be the double Shard Shatter to deal with the water elementals. So he's just gotta set up the safest Deep Freeze possible to preserve his elementals.
I'll go with the Evo instead.
Seems reasonable. Conjurer's Calling? That's not the play?
He doesn't want to go
That's not the
punch?
play?
Wow.
Oh, I guess he really wants the Shanvala activation. I mean, he can get it with...
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was going to take missiles. Oh, it's still an activation, my bad.
Yeah, it does activate here, and he gets a couple of spells in, and he gets another Deep Freeze. Oh my god. Is that better than having 2 8-drops on the board and a Conjurer's Calling in hand? I have my questions about these last couple of turns.
Okay. Militia, there's 2 fragments in the deck only, and double jump is guaranteed to get Consume Magic by this point. He can buff up the Militia to 4 with the Spirit Jailer. But I think Tom is all in looking for Blade Dance here, which is reasonable.
He's got the dance, but he doesn't have anything to go along with it.
Right. He wanted Blade Dance plus a buff.
So, trade there, trade into the 2-2. The Blade Dance is still just not doing enough here.
It's really not. I thought he would end up holding it to maybe clear up the board on the next turn.
He can now go
it
trade.
It would involve a very fortunate top deck.
Yeah, he can go for Glavebound plus 2-2 to clear off here, which is pretty good, to be fair. I don't know if it's pretty good enough, though, here, because he is massively running out of resources, and he's just not even close to lethal.
I'm playing Control Mage, Control Demon Hunter,
Right.
which is what we used to call this deck, funnily enough. Okay. I don't think Posesi needs to mess around. Like, Flame Strike looks very powerful here.
You know what else looks very powerful, though, Gia?
Deep freeze. That looks strong too.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But,
He's got 2 deep freezes.
Sure. Yeah, get a 6/6.
Attaboy, Posesi. You can make the read that Tom's just spent so much damage trying to deal with your board. You've seen a Blade Dance, and you have second deep freeze that if you go for this line, it has almost 0 failure rate.
Yep.
3 fragments in the deck. Not a great Militia. I think Tom is locked out.
I think it's just over. He can go for Militia to clear off some of the board. Both the Ellies at least, and then hope to be unfrozen for the next few turns. But then Frozen 2, not quite as good as the first one, but still very good, can come down for Posesi to close things out.
Not nearly as good.
Agreed, but I didn't want to upset anyone.
Yep, as long as Posesi doesn't go into the unknown with a Prime on the next turn, he will 100% win the game. Tom has a fair amount of damage left in his deck with the double Lapidaries, but it just comes too slowly. He's used the Skulls already, so he's only going to draw 1 card each turn outside of the Chaos Strike. Looks like he's charging up for a bigger Militia.
Yeah.
instead.
I think that's fair. Like, the plan we were suggesting just did not win. He needs something more impressive to go down than this.
His deck needed to not be in that order with the 2 fragments he shuffled in just coming off the top.
Yeah. That's not fun. And then you freeze again.
Yep. And then
Nice.
Tom can let it go.
Reindeers are better than people. Yeah, I got 1 too. Good job, Derek.
Only 2 fragments. It is completely hopeless for Tom. And to be fair, Posesi got extremely good outcomes off of the generations and just so much card draw in the beginning to make sure that he never ran out of resources to work with. But I can't help but think that maybe Tom could have taken a more aggressive stance in the early game. There was tons of damage that was sunk into minions. I think with Posesi's draws that he got later on, Tom probably still would not have gotten there, but maybe could have gotten closer.
Yeah, I do think towards the mid-game, things got a little bit sloppy from Posesi with that many options in his hand. You know, throwing out an Apprentice that had extremely little value when he had Evo in hand. I think he could have picked some lower value options along the way, like he picked double Steward of Scrolls along the game, which just wasn't really playable considering how much stuff he had in his hand, whereas a slightly higher tempo option might have been the way to go. But, you know, having said that, all of that aside, the overall game plan was a winning one. Getting these deep freezes down and making sure he didn't die before then. The matchup understanding was strong enough to get the win, for sure.
Just trying to find a way to fit in a Maleficent joke we've been talking about Disney throughout this entire stream.
Just say that. That's joke adjacent. That's close enough.
Okay, it's an impressive Blade Dance, but that is the last of Tom's cards. Flame Strike King, very clean. You just know it's been an easy game when it's strictly wrong for Posesi to go for it.
Yeah. It's just winning. I don't think there's, like, stack up the cards left in Tom's deck. They do not win this game. Yeah. And he knows it too. 2-1 to Tom, and Posesi taking the win with the Mage is the tough spot. That is the roadblock for him to get over. And now, still unfavored, but the rest of the series is unlocked for him now. He's gotten the win with the Mage, only has now left to take the win with the Demon Hunter and the Priest, which is arguably around 2 50-50 matchups. It's definitely not over.
It's true. And I do think, at least from today, Posesi has been a little bit more on form than Tom has been. We have picked apart maybe Posesi's micro decisions for the most part, but I've not seen any big macro error from Posesi. He really, really understands his position in each matchup, and his overall game plans have been consistent. So, for the mirror, I wonder if that tech of Penflinger in Posesi's list is potentially gonna hurt or help him. I can only assume you'd rather have a Glavebound than a Penflinger.
Yeah, you'd probably rather have a Glavebound. You'd probably rather have an Ooze, as Tom does have as well. Not ideal in the Demon Hunter matchup, because generally you're only going to be destroying a 1 durability weapon rather than the full 2. But it at very least makes it so that your opponent feels a lot more hesitant to just equip a weapon and pass. That play really does start to be shut off your opponent. So it's more the fear of Ooze than the Ooze itself that will get to Posesi in this game. As we are going to have to wait before we get to the Demon Hunter mirror, though, because I believe he's going for the Priest first here instead.
That's right. And Posesi's Priest is teched with a 1 of Kobold Sticky Finger, so not the Ooze, that could be the kicker, but maybe good old Sticky Finger later on, giving Posesi a chance to steal Eldrazi Warblades could be a very, very big deal. You often want to use Murazond for that exact purpose.
Getting things rolling here for Posesi. I think I do like the full mulligan there. He had the Cabal Acolyte plus Wave of Apathy combo, but I think it's a bit too inconsistent in this matchup to be worth a keep.
Yeah, it's true. Very rarely will the Demon Hunter get in a position where they're solo playing Glavebound and Soul Shard Lapidary, and you can sometimes miss the steal on the big minion. You can put them in that position if he had, say, early curve to go along with the Cabal Acolyte Wave of Apathy. I would have been on board with keeping it if he had, say, Sethic or One Maker to use in the early game, but since it was not there, Posesi is prioritizing earlier development.
Coin 2 into 2. This is looking pretty strong for Posesi. It's not like he's going to run out of plays either, with the Raise Dead obviously ready to go. I like this a lot. This is how I like to approach the matchup and like to see the players do the same, which is just max tempo right from the get-go.
2 into Raise Dead means that Posesi will have tons of shots at picking up Renews and Radiances, which are very, very important in the matchup to get Posesi out of Demon Hunter's lethal range when we reach the later parts of the game.
While I will say that Tom does not have... Actually, I was going to say he doesn't have necessarily the most dominant early game. He's not putting forward a lot of threats, but he's definitely reacting very strongly here. And he has no chance whatsoever of running out of value this game. Marrow Slicer Spectral Sight into Skull of Gul'dan is insane.
I love the use of Embalming Ritual here for Posesi. He makes a rather sticky minion that if Tom wants to clear, you would have to be, floating a fair amount of mana if he just wants to hero power on the Reborn here. And so Posesi gives himself a great shot of sticking an Apotheosis.
Right, and so if he goes Apo here, it goes up to 5. He can then renew it back up to full health. And although that dies to a swing from hero power plus the Marrow Slicer, pretty much shuts out the possibility of going Lapidary on the following turn.
I definitely like the look of that, but Posesi is gonna hold on to Apotheosis a little bit longer. To be fair, I think the more I've seen experienced Priest players, the less eager they are to play Apotheosis as soon as it's available. I've seen people hold on to it for even more health gain with Wild Pyromancer, but it did feel like a pretty clean spot to go for it, barring, of course, that we can see consume magic in Tom's hand.
Right, which is a fear, of course. You can just save it for the Wild Pyromancer, like you said, to get the immediate maximum heal as possible. But, I don't know, heading into that turn, being able to shut out the... it basically shut out both the Lapidary and the Glavebound, because at 5 health, Glavebound would have been extremely weak on the following turn as well. I think it was a fairly strong disruption play, actually, from my perspective.
Off the Cleric, it was also not an easy decision. There could have been another Raise Dead for even more Wand Makers, but I think it's fine for Posesi to just take a lower value card, make sure he has a Wave of Apathy at his disposal for cheap.
Fairly low value Blade Dance coming down here, but honestly I think it's probably just the way to go for Tom. Clear the board up before you go for the Skull next turn. Make sure there's nothing for Apo on the board. Feels very powerful.
Job's done.
Tom's been playing the entire game very aggressively using Shard Shatters on a single minion. I would say this is the complete opposite of how we saw him play the Mage game, and so far it's looking much more powerful.
Kind of an interesting spot now because Skull is obviously good on this turn, but Consume Magic is kind of tempting to throw down with a Marrow Slicer on this turn.
I grow impatient.
I think if you go Marrow Slicer, you just hold on to the Consume Magic.
Okay.
'Cause you're still worried about Apotheosis, right?
That's fair.
The upside of Marrow Slicer is you set up potential lethal over 2 turns with Glavebound Adept, but they need to not have any healing in hand, and there's a bunch of 1-cost spells, so I think it's a big ask. In the end, I like just going for the Skull.
Gets the weapon in while he can, just to keep swinging.
Surely this is the Apo now. Inner Fire also makes this a gigantic lifesteal minion.
Yeah, the only consideration is what you do with the rest of your mana. I think Sethek is not worth it here because of the spells you're getting off of the... Sorry, off of the Mage Scribe itself, and I would rather spend my mana on, like, Hero Power or Renew My Own Face.
Correct.
Oh, this is so big.
It's a large boy.
Oh, Power Word Feast as well. It's just 2 more health.
Healing. Basically a Reno was this Onyx Mage Scribe.
Yeah, absolutely nutty. Forcing your opponent to have the Consume Magic here, which Tom did save, despite my ludicrous suggestion to potentially go to the otherwise, which is the only thing keeping him in the game right now, because forget about lethal on the other side, he would have just been dead if he couldn't clear that up.
And the Mage Scribe, even post-silence, is of a very annoying size where it can easily value trade over a Glavebound Adept, because otherwise I think this would be a good spot for Tom to try and land a minion, because the damage from hand feels like it's not necessarily enough to get there after that big heal from Posesi, and you're expecting more where that came from.
So how does that shape out for you then on this turn?
Maybe even a re-equipped Marrow Slicer plus mana burn.
Okay.
Still gonna go for the Glavebound in the end. Definitely not a bad way to go about things. And it means that if the Mage Scribe trades the Glavebound, sometimes your 2-2 can stick for additional damage, and every point of damage is crucial for Tom.
Which is why I think Posesi does need to be thinking about, well, obviously clearing off damage on the board, but trying to set up a counter-lethal possibility at the same time, because Wave of Apathy, Cabal, Shadow Priest, while it doesn't get any healing in on this turn, you've seen a Blade Dance. Your opponent didn't go for one there where it would have been fairly powerful. I think I like getting the steal down on this turn.
That's very true. He's also seen all of these Skull discounted cards, I believe. So I don't think there's any natural 14 damage that Demon Hunter can put together at 8 mana. Problem is, it doesn't actually set up counter lethal, right?
No,
Not
it doesn't.
immediately.
Just kind of
It
starts.
takes 2 turns.
Yeah, starts the process there, though. Forces Tom to make defensive plays, because even if he does have the Blade Dance, that's mana spent on Blade Dance, right? It's something to at least stop him from just punching you in the face turn after turn.
Actually thought it was even fine to potentially just scheme to heal 1 there and send the 4-face. But then again, he has double Sethek, so it's very close.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
This looks like a killer Blade Dance.
Yeah, the
Perfect
Lapidary.
for Tom.
Unfortunately, not quite able to get there with the Lapidary, but like you said, with the Marrow Slicer is insane.
Marrow Slicer is the important part because he can get the 2 charges in across 2 turns, attack Posesi from all fronts, try and close out the game as soon as possible. Posesi needs major help from this Renew.
Oh, that's not quite it. No taunts he can put in the way.
And he's seen that this is the second Aldraki War... Oh, sorry. There's one more Warblades in the deck. So the Thought Steal was a consideration, but you're much more likely to hit healing off of the Cobalt Spellkin, which he got both of the good spells.
That's insane!
Hello?
Radiance into Radiance! Oh my god, that really could not have gone any better for Posesi. Yeah, thumbs up indeed, mate. That was lucky.
Not fair.
That's not how it works.
Warlock.
Okay, 2-cost
Whoa.
Lapidary.
Such a beautiful
Mana burn or hero power? I guess 9 versus 8 mana isn't that... sorry, 9 versus 7 mana
Yeah, I
isn't
want
that big of a
damage.
difference. Push the damage.
Oh, it's so strong for Posesi, though. He can just go in with the Sethic, Apotheosis, Radiance, Renew as well.
My god.
Oh!
Posesi!
It's happening! It's actually happening!
The Sethics have given him a lifeline. His Cobalt Spellkin gave him the best possible spells. Tom, with the nod, realizes what his fate is. I think Tom gave it the best possible shot he could have this
Yeah.
game. Was critical of his Demon Hunter play versus Mage. I think he approached it against Priest in just about the right way, which is trying to chain the damage as soon as possible. Realize that you cannot outvalue them in the long run. It's looking tough now.
Oh man, even the power word feast, the part that we don't usually see of the heal at the end of the turn, is absolutely ludicrous here as well. Just means it's almost impossible for this to be cleared off.
take the walk.
Okay, I like the Wand Maker from Tom. His only shot of winning now is Consume Magic again on the Cobalt Spellkin, but he doesn't generate it from the Wand Maker. He's used both Blade Dance, so the only way this is going away is through actual damage sunk into it.
Yikes. Okay, I guess at this point, you hit your opponent, they go up to full health. Maybe if you can stick a board, you can still get there. It's not 100% over yet for for Tom.
It looks like Posesi's gonna go for a Soul Mirror here. Oh, maybe not. Never mind. Shadow Word Death, Shadow Madness.
You can even go
That's
for
a full clear.
oh, he can't go for Luminance first. I mean, he has like Lazul's Scheme plus Forbidden Words as well, which is also just a full clear, right? Oi, oi, oi.
Just be feeling fine enough to leave up the Militia, or just scheme the Lapidary.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a pretty strong scheme by this point, sure. You were saying the only way Tom wins from here is to stick a board, which I agree with, and that's primarily through Militia. So as long as Posesi can hold on to the Soul Mirror, then he is home free.
Yeah, exactly. Militia's the only way.
Forbidden Words that.
I mean, he overdraws if he does that because he gets 2 cards then, but I
Yeah.
guess you don't care at all, ever.
And this was rough for Tom. That was an inordinate amount of healing generated by Posesi throughout the entirety of this game.
Yeah, it was very
You know how
unlucky.
the client sometimes gives you like deal 60 damage to enemy heroes quests? Like, Tom could have finished that 4 times over in one game alone.
Yeah, he's done such an absurd amount, and yet still, it just doesn't even come close here.
Hand is too full.
Now, all this stuff, and he doesn't actually have targeted removal on his minions.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Like, just trade mana burn plus, I don't know, the Dark Prophecy.
Posesi never wants to draw a
Sure.
card again.
Just go even further all in. Why not?
He just has the Soul Mirror.
So
So
we've-
he's got the check for Tom.
Everything's coming in 3s today. I'm seeing a pattern. We've had the 3 Lazuls, the 3 Sethics, the 3 Lab Partners. There's a code somewhere in here, Gia, I'm telling you. Yep.
6, which is a multiple of 3. 00229, which is a multiple of 3.
This goes right to the top, I'm telling you.
Enemies will fall.
There's no other place to go by this point.
Okay. So, this
Wait.
hand is like kind of bad in a way. Like, you can see the one
Yeah,
card
it's true.
left.
It's true.
It's
Not gonna lie.
Soulshare, which is pretty good.
But I think we can math it out that as long as Posesi hero powers face every turn after he deals with this board, there is literally no way he loses. The last 3 cards in Tom's deck, aside from the 2 Soul Fragments, are Militia, Kane, and Spirit Jailer, which he has an answer for Militia with the Soul Mirror, if it even generates enough minions to begin with, because the Soul Fragments need to stay in the deck.
Yeah, like the one thing is if Tom plays a Militia that makes too many minions on board, because he goes Soulshare into Spirit Jailer and then Militia without drawing any fragments, then maybe Posesi doesn't have enough board space because he's got all these reborn Sethics in play. Like, I don't know, it doesn't seem likely, but I appreciate that Tom's playing it out here at least.
Yeah, I highly appreciate that as well. This is a sick initiation, though.
True.
At this point, Posesi would take Thought Steal for a couple of fragments. There's 0 mana heal too.
True, true.
Okay, it has to be Militia. And no fragments before it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you got the Militia.
Okay. That's the card you were talking about. So, it just doesn't get that, does it?
Well, you Soul Shear the 2/6 and
You Soulshare the
Militia?
Cane, right, and finish it off.
okay. I mean, I was concerned about like what you said a while ago, which is leaving Posesi with the most minions so that they can't Soul
Right.
Mirror, but it feels like that also doesn't work. So
Yeah, I like that Tom's not attacking here, because if there was any chance, it would be through that, being the out.
Right.
Simply going Wave here, I think, is like enough to keep you alive for the rest of the game, while you just hit your opponent in the face every turn.
can go for the counter Militia. Posesi has 2 fragments in the deck.
Yeah. Or, yeah, whatever. I think Soul Mirror is just the clear here anyway, right? Just go bang, bang, bang. Yeah. You can trade everything in.
Baba Boom.
Baba Booey!
So much healing! Posesi! He was down 0-2 and now he's brought it all the way to a game 5. Oh my goodness. Demon Hunter Mirror for the last one?
Yeah, exactly. He's one with the Mage, he's one with the Priest, just the Mirror left remaining, which Tom did get a very good matchup in previously in the day. Taking a look at the lists again, there's the Ooze available for Tom, as we were talking about. There is the 1 Panthara, the 1 Spectral Sight, the 1 Consume Magic. It's a list that's very much here and there without much cohesion in the lineup. Whereas Posesi's kind of similar, actually. He's got the 1 Penflinger, the 1 Consume Magic, the 1 Adept, the 1 Spectral Sight. I think it's very, very even here. The Ooze being the obvious tech card that gives an advantage to Tom, I really don't think is that staggering of an advantage at all.
It's true. I just think that the lack of Glaive Bound might come back to bite Posesi. I tend to think the maximum damage list is pretty useful in the mirror. But then again, Penflinger can be an X factor. A lot of the time in the mirror, you can take advantage of the fact that your opponent often doesn't want to hero power down your minions after they take in value trades in order to push additional damage with your minions. But Penflinger can make for some cleaner ways to clean up the board. We'll see how that pans out, but overall, I'm inclined to put Tom's list in the favor.
I would agree, just about. Like, maybe the extra minions at the start can help out Posesi because he has double Panthara, whereas Tom only has 1. But he drew his, and Posesi hasn't drawn his yet, which means that Tom is off to a blisteringly fast starting hand.
The perfect curve for the early game, but the more I've played the Demon Hunter Mirror, the more I've realized that curving out, while it's a great bonus at the beginning, can often be completely negated by a Shard Shatter on the other side, and then you get into the real meat of the game, which is optimizing weapon swings, preloading your mana to equip Eldraki Warblade, so on and so forth, and then it can come down to who gets better skulls later on, or even the earlier skulls.
Yeah, I will say, I think we've been seeing like Fragment Shuffler into Shard Shatter Mystic an above average amount of times. I think that the early development starts haven't been getting the percentage of wins that they are deserving of, because you know, it's not that often that your opponent does have perfect clear with Shard Shatter. And I think these kind of starts that both players are getting off to, while they can obviously cancel out if both players have a good start, it can snowball pretty quickly.
And I like that Posesi's going for the next Wand Maker here. Like, he had options to clear off the minions and put the board back in his favor, but because there is always the threat of Shard Shatter on the other side, you can feel like you ended up wasting damage. And if you just develop more onto the board, if your opponent has a Shard Shatter of their own, they have to give up their board into that if they want to use that as the clear option. It's gonna be a Twin Slice also played out for Posesi here, though, because he doesn't quite have that clean of a board sweep other than Blade Dance, which can get more useful later on.
Yeah, Posesi definitely playing to that early board control. Sacrificing the damage here is a pretty big deal, but it pushes Tom off wanting to go for like Coin Marrow Slicer, or pretty much puts them on having to have the Shard Shatter to have a strong clear here.
Impatient.
I would still lean towards just Hero Power and Panthera here and follow the curve for Tom. Just not sure whether he would be tanking the 2-2 and trade into it. I would just push it face, honestly.
Really? Push that face on that turn. I think with this hand, he needs to be trading a little bit, right? Like, these weapons want to be going face, the minions want to trade here.
That's fair. No Shard Shatter, no Blade Dance. It's just that the 2-2s from Posesi, if they want... Like, they weren't doing that great of a value trade either, unless Posesi wanted to send them both into the Spirit Jailer, which I'd be pretty happy with if I were Tom.
We can see some pretty cute plays with Pen Flinger on this turn, with like Pen Flinger shoot a minion, double jump Pen Flinger, and then second slice allows you to clear the board. I don't know if that's necessarily worth spending that much mana on Pen Flinger, which doesn't develop any minions.
I kind of like Pen Flinger on the Panthera, Chaos Strike, and then Spirit Jailer, just leave up the 1-1.
Okay, that seems like a nice middle ground.
The downside of using Chaos Strike is Blade Dance gets a bit weaker, but I feel like it's worth cycling with Posesi's hand. He says he wants the Cane, though, which, to be fair, Cane for value trade is a pretty underrated play in the mirror, I would say. It kind of requires a Shatter Shard to clean up super nicely.
Yeah, I think actually upon seeing this a little closer, I like this from Posesi, because again, we got to think about what are the plays that Tom wants to make on this turn. It's Marrow Slicer or Coin Lapidary are the plays that are actually powerful here. And Kane's pretty good against both of them. It's just a very awkwardly shaped minion that you don't want to let your opponent attack face with again.
For Tom here, he had a pretty clean answer for the type of board Posesi put down, which also lets him pre-equip Eldraki for the next turn with the Lapidary. It's working out great for Tom. I definitely want to cycle here with Posesi's hand. I think he needs to hit the heavy hitters. And also an Eldraki of his own in the near future. Spectral Sight. Okay, it looks like he's gonna go for the Linger instead of Hero Power here, which is, you know, essentially just saving himself 1 HP.
Yep, makes sense.
It wasn't me!
And then Jailer Hero Power, I suppose. I'm not really seeing the point of double jump quite yet when it could be used to tutor a skull on 7.
Right.
Job done.
There is, however, 1 Consume Magic left in Posesi's list, so not guaranteed Skull.
Such a beautiful
Nice easy soul shot here. Because he equipped the War Blades last turn as well, he gets a big swing of health. The heal for 7, deal 7 is such a swing in the matchup here.
Right. Tom is well and truly in the lead here from all fronts of the race. Posesi just doesn't have the option of trying to counter push for lethal. He is cycling with Chaos Strike, trying to find his Blade Dance. Oh, sorry, there was already 1 in hand. Yeah,
well, if someone was
good.
to read a transcript of that, Gia, without having the intonation on your voice at the end, it was technically correct what you were saying.
Tom can pretty happily just equip his Marrow Slicer. Oh, that makes the turn even better.
Oh, such a big deal. The one thing he was losing out on was a little bit of card draw in case his turn slowed down, but now he has the pressure, he has the development to follow up. He even has some pretty strong clears coming up if Posesi starts to put his own threats onto the board.
Gravebound is such a big deal, but this top deck for Posesi is huge as well. Not necessarily this turn, because he has used a fair bit of the damage buffs. So I think it's double jump, try to hit the skull here, and just charge up for the biggest Eldrazi next turn. It's a 50-50.
Ooh.
Got it.
Skull, that's a big deal.
Warlock.
Ay. Not what you want to see. Unless he was looking for his lapidaries.
Yeah, you just really wanted any attack buffs you can possibly get your hands on there.
He took a nice window here to go for the slow turn because he knows Tom cannot have lethal without skull discounted cards with the amount of mana right there, but oh my goodness, it's just not enough healing for Posesi. He has one more draw with the Panthera, but it's kind of expensive.
It might be enough healing right now. I'm not going to say it's over yet. He's got the Warblades double buff here. He can trade and go Lapidary if he wants to get the clear, or go for a Blade Dance. The choice is his. He's not dead yet.
The only downside, I believe... Oh, he has the mana still, right, for Hero Power Panthera with the Shard Shatter.
I like that.
Oh, looks like he's going Blade Dance instead. I did like your line as well, because you get to fit in the Panthera and free
unlocks
up
the
the
skull.
skull on the left.
Yeah, I like that a little better too. I think the 1 damage to face is probably not quite worth it when you're searching so desperately for those Lapidaries.
And for Tom, as he can start cycling a Consume Magic, he has 2. So it's gonna be maximum push onto the board, though. I can respect this as well.
Still fight.
Quite clearly repping lethal next turn, so Posesi needs to heal at least a little bit. He can obviously do at least 2 on this turn, but he's looking for that little bit extra.
Oh, it just is so awkward because he didn't play the Panthera. The
Yeah.
Skull for no Outcast cannot get you a playable Soul Shard Lapidary this turn. He needed to trade the Panthera last turn.
To be fair, he would have needed a little bit extra because there was a decent chance he draws the fragments then at that point, which would have then locked off the Lapidary anyway. I still just think it was worth it to go for the other way, though.
He has double 1-cost Marrow Slicer, though.
Right.
You could just re-equip that after a Skull, because you have 9 mana. Posesi knows he's in trouble, but Tom needs some help, to be fair.
It's
And
not there
Posesi
yet.
has the second Eldrazi in hand.
It's still
One
not quite there. Still not there.
Still not there! Lapidary? That's GG. Tom gets it at the very last moment. Oh my goodness. Posesi gave it its best shot. We've seen some very inspired plays throughout the day, but in the end, it is Tom who is the second player making it to the semi-finals in Group.
Brutal way for Posesi to go out, and you can just see for him how much it meant there. The ups and downs that Posesi has had along the way, looking at almost guaranteed relegation, it felt like, as he started off 0-2 in Division B, things looking absolutely dreadful for him. He knuckled down, turned things around, got those wins on the table, got through to the playoffs despite starting in Division B, and it was so close to being enough, but right at the final hurdle there, you know, you hate to say it, but I think there was maybe a little bit more that could have been done in order to try and turn that one around. But congratulations to Tom. That was a stunning way to close things out. Not the cleanest of days overall, but he ended it in style.
He absolutely tidied it up towards the end there with the Demon Hunter versus Priest play. I really think was correct from Tom, although Posesi managed to generate enough healing to get out of range. The mirror, I think Tom went for some very cool lines towards the end there. And redeemed himself for the earlier half of the day. For Posesi, though, he can definitely hold his head high, in my opinion, because he's had a good season to close it off, despite a pretty bad start. We were